Now, the West is in trouble. We've wasted or given away our political, military and economic advantages, and we could be facing a savage economic decline. That's the view of Dr. Dambisa Moyo, former Goldman Sachs economist turned author, whose latest book is How the West Was Lost. She joins us now. Good to see you.
Hi,
Thanks very much, Dee, for coming in. Look, we know the story. We've got the rise of the emerging markets, and the West is losing economic and political influences, is basically what this book is about. And everybody is consumed with this overall story. I'm just going to pick up something here that is, I think for some CNBC viewers in the States, will be fairly alarming. The odds are, however, the United States will be a bona fide socialist welfare state by the latter part of this century. We'll move from a fully fledged capitalist society of entrepreneurs to a socialist nation in just a few decades. You're not talking about a command socialist nation like Germany or Sweden, which works, but something that is worse. Are you saying that's going to happen, or it's likely if we don't change something?
Okay, so the fundamental premise of this book is that the West has an opportunity to steer clear of what I consider an economic demise. And I actually think that this is more a cautionary tale, saying if you don't do anything, clearly there are structural problems around unemployment, structural issues around education and infrastructure that I would argue are still not being dealt with in an aggressive way. And that being the case, the U.S. could end up in a situation where it's rapaciously feeding on itself, and in that sense end up in a more socialistic structure.
Now, we need to read the whole book for the answers here, but if you can summarise, what would be the things the US has to do that it's not doing to avoid this outcome?
Right. So, I mean, some of the stuff is quite obvious, actually. It's things like focusing on education, focusing on infrastructure. We've heard a lot about this, but I actually think there's not much being done about it. So, for example, President Obama's 3% of GDP plan, all that's great, but that's surely not enough given the structural problem and the fact that this has been going on for some time. If you look at what's going on in China right now, and if you ask yourself, is China going to keep growing? The answer is yes. Is China going to grow faster than Europe and the United States? Yes. However, the jury's still out on whether or not China will be able to converge to the point where its per capita income is at the levels or higher than the developed West. And that's largely because of resource constraints. And there again is an issue. Energy efficiency, resource issues are things that the Western countries, I think, need to focus on much more aggressively, but they're not.
And Dambisa, hi, this is Christine. I'm glad you brought up China, because China certainly is exercising its financial clout. We have President Hu Jintao visiting the U.S. next week, demanding assurances that their dollar assets are secure. It is also backing Eurozone debt. What do you make of this rising economic clout from China? Is it for real?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think anybody who says it's not is clearly not being serious about what the situation is. I mean, China is, as we know, the second largest economy right now. Of course, on a per capita basis, it's still sort of number 99. So it's got a lot of structural issues itself that it has to deal with, and of course, tactical issues, around real estate and what they're going to do now. However, I think that the discourse around the China-U.S. relationship has been quite aggressively against China, especially where the issues of protectionism are concerned. But we all know that most countries around the world participate in protectionism, in the U.S. and European countries included. I mean, their aggressive stance against African countries with subsidy programs in agriculture is just a case in point.
Dambisa, China's overtaken so many countries so far in terms of growth. When will it actually take over the U.S., in your opinion? Will it take years, or is it just around the corner?
Well, I think who knows for sure? I mean, the forecasts are that we're talking about sort of 2015, 2017, when China becomes the largest economy. There are fundamental constraints around arable land, water, minerals, as we were talking about earlier, and also energy. I mean, these are fundamental constraints, I believe. And whether you think it's about misallocation of resources or fundamentally a problem around the fact that there's just not enough resources on the planet. I mean, the Chinese need to move, easily another 500 to 1 billion people out of poverty. So they have some serious work cut out for them.
We do have some serious work cut out for them, Dambisa, and I want to pick up on a point that you talked about with protectionism, and we have some serious work out of the United States to do there. There's this idea that made in America is coming back again, that if more and more goods are manufactured here, we are going to create more and more jobs. Is that necessarily the case? Where is the fine line? Where is the sweet spot between having goods, products made in America, and protectionism?
Well, I'm a big free trader. I believe in free trade as it was described in theory, but the reality reality is that is not the case in practice. The United States, as we know, has 30-odd million people out of work, 9.4% unemployment, and so there's a lot of euphoria now about what we're seeing in the markets, but the fundamental structural problems are not yet being addressed. With regards to unemployment, I would argue that in an ideal world, we would like to see more competition globally, but the reality is I don't see how you solve that structural problem of unemployment, particularly in the manufacturing sector in the United States, without being somewhat more aggressive on trade policies.
What is interesting in the book is that you say that in the game of protectionist brinkmanship, the US actually, though, has holding the better cards, much better cards than China.
That's right.
We're going to have to let you go for now.
Okay,
come back and talk more. I tell you what, there's an awful lot in here that we talk about every day in asset markets that we'd like to get your thoughts on. So good to see you. Dambisa Moyo, How the West Was Lost.